Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this new session of the Daily Talks. And today we will be very happy to welcome our friend Antony Slumbers to discuss some of the most important topics we wanted to cover. Just as a reminder, we started our collaboration with Antony last year. We reached out to him to have his support in writing some excellent pieces about space as a service. And you can still find these papers on his website, on our website. And this has been a great insight for us. So at the beginning of the year, we just decided to reach out to him again and to ask him about support for the 5 pillars of content that we wanted to develop this year. So there was talent, user experience, investment, data, and sustainability. And the conversation went great, but we were all wrong because out of these topics, there was not the word coronavirus, which is a huge mistake, obviously, as we can imagine today. So if we want to add coronavirus to the conversation, we can try to link coronavirus and sustainability and see what's next when it comes to sustainability in real estate. Everyone will agree that coronavirus probably will accelerate some of the trends that we observed before the crisis. But maybe it will kind of put a risk on some of the other trends that we saw appearing. And when it comes to sustainability, we hear more and more conversation going about economic recovery will cast a shadow on sustainability and on commitments to a more sustainability approach of business. We were wondering if this will happen in real estate, if sustainability and the consequences of coronavirus will be tackled the right way in the real estate industry. So Antony, maybe he will not have the answer, the full answer, but he will help us analyzing that. And just for you to know, we are going to issue his new paper related to sustainability in real estate tomorrow on our website. It will be available. So do not hesitate to go to our website. And before that, for these 20 minutes to come, Antony will tell us about this link, sustainability, coronavirus, and please feel free to ask any type of question that you may require. Antony, the stage is yours. Thank you for joining us.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen with you. So hopefully now you should be seeing my welcome screen of my presentation. I'm now going to make it full screen, so it should be full size for everyone. And I'm going to push the button to start. And away we go. Right. We're going to talk about sustainability, coronavirus, and real estate. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Coronavirus has really hijacked the stage here. This year's play in real estate was supposed to be all about climate change and sustainability, but now it's COVID-19 all the way down, as they say. Also, it seems as the world comes to a halt, the streets are empty, and we all remain locked indoors. So in some ways, this feels like an absolutely terrible time, a shocking time for real estate. But I actually believe that this probably represents the greatest opportunity in real estate in decades. And the reason for that is because we know we have to deal with climate change, we know we have to deal with sustainability, and we know we have to deal with COVID-19. Put all these things together, and you actually get a flywheel of change, because the only way to deal with one of them means you have to deal with the other one. So these things are becoming inextricably entwined. In fact, the pandemic is really acting as a forcing function that techies amongst you will know about, but it's actually sort of forcing on things to happen that wouldn't have happened before. So I think what is going to happen within real estate and prop tech is that within the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see the same change as we would have expected to see in the next 5 to 10 years, which is really quite something. Because as Darwin said, it is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. And clearly, this is a time to be responsive to change. And it reminds me of the saying of Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor of Chicago in 2008, during the global financial crisis. And he said, you must never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is that it's an opportunity to do things you could not do before. And we mustn't forget that. We must not waste this serious crisis. Now let's zoom out a bit. So let's zoom out to what would have been. What would I have been saying if the last 60 days had not happened? Well, I would have been saying this is where the most important thing is real estate is happening. This is Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, with $6 trillion under management in January this year. He does an annual newsletter to customers, and this one was entitled A Fundamental Reshaping of Finance. And it was subheader was climate change is driving a profound reassessment of risk, and we anticipate a significant reallocation of capital, He then went on to talk about, well, what effect will climate change have on bonds? Will 30-year mortgages still be possible in at-risk areas? Will there be areas of the world that you simply cannot get insurance? And if drought and flooding affects the food supply, what happens to inflation and interest rates? But then he said the 5 words that change everything. Climate risk is investment risk. Climate risk is investment risk. The money is now worried about the impact of climate on their money. And that really changes everything. 5 words to change everything. When the money's worried, things happen. He then ended up saying, our investment conviction is that sustainability and climate integrated portfolios can provide better risk-adjusted returns to investors. But there's other things going on as well. So you've got climate change changing things, but demographics matter as well. You probably know the phrase, demography is destiny. Now, if you're talking about millennials, and yuck, I hate the word millennials, but actually millennials are getting quite old now. The oldest cohort of millennials are nearing 40. And whilst I don't believe almost any of these millennials are X, Y, or Z, it is true that as a rule of thumb, the 40s and under are more interested in improving society than generating profit. Deloitte did a huge survey of this last year, and it became clear it was a changing attitude. Now, these millennials up to 40, they're climbing the greasy pole. But what's climbing with them is ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Because they're getting into positions of power, the interest in ESG is climbing into positions of power with them. And actually, millennials are about to get rich. In fact, as Larry Fink again said, we are about to witness over the next 10, 15, 20 years, the largest transfer of wealth in history. 24 trillion is to be transferred from baby boomers to millennials, the largest transfer of wealth in history. Now, you look at the position of real estate in a world where climate risk is investment risk, and we're in the crosshairs because the real estate industry actually is an environmental horror show. This is Durer's 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and it's there for a reason. Real estate uses 40% of the world's energy. It outputs 30% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. In fact, in New York, real estate generates 66% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in New York. Now, what's going to happen here? We're going to start to get a mixture of carrots, and I think actually more likely sticks, being used against the real estate industry to start doing something about this. And this is already happening. You've already got New York City has mandated that real estate owners who own buildings above 25,000 square feet have to reduce the carbon emissions of those buildings by 40% by 2030, and they're going to start tallying things up at 2025. So big sticks are coming. So that's sort of what would have been. We would have just been concentrating completely on that. But what will be now in the age of coronavirus? Frankly, this changes everything. Because what people want in the future will not be what they wanted in the past. In fact, what they want in the future is not the right way to express it. It's what people will demand in the future is not going to be the same as they wanted in the past. And there's two new zeitgeist changing norms that this has generated. The first is that the outside world can be scary, it can be dangerous and unsafe. Our world, real estate, the built environment can be scary, it can be dangerous and unsafe. The second thing is, we've now actually realized that it is possible for something to happen that impacts the whole world. And this has impacted the whole world. But on the other hand, smell that air. This is the Himalayas from Jalandhar. Now those mountains are 200 kilometers away from here. And I understand that they have not been seen like that in 30 years because of pollution. So things are happening for the first time, probably in history. Hundreds of millions of people are smelling air and seeing the world around them in the way that they've never done before. And this is why there's a prop tech flywheel, because we absolutely need a safer, healthy built environment. Otherwise, because there's a virus out there, we need a safe, healthy environment. But to get that, we need a broad, a deep, and a pervasive notion of sustainability. These two things work together. You can't have one without the other. Now, the point is, a lot of this is known knowns. If you look at the little image on the right, this is Jeff Bezos' thing about how Amazon does so well. So he said, well, if we have a lower cost structure, we can have lower prices, and that will give a big selection and better customer experience, get us more traffic, which will attract more sellers, which will give us a better selection, and away we go. Now, we know what the problems are in real estate, from design to finance, construction, operation, sale or leaseback. Being polite, we know everything in real estate works in a suboptimal way, but there's always been a problem. For the last 10 years, we've been in a real estate bull market. Companies, real estate companies, have been optimized for the world as it is. There's always so much criticism of real estate from prop tech about real estate companies don't get it, they don't do this, they don't do that. They didn't need to. In a 10-year bull market, you don't really need a lot of innovation, and they've been optimized for what works in that market. But the pandemic is upending completely real estate, because now we have a situation where our offices are empty. And people are realizing that actually our customers never like them very much anyway. Read any of the Leesman reports and see how many people think their workplaces enable them to be productive. It's about 50%. But worse than that, now they are actually scared of where they're going to work. And funnily enough, as we're going through the biggest real-time experiments in remote working ever, maybe they don't even need them anymore. Hush, don't say it too quickly. But a lot of people are finding out that, funny enough, they can do an awful lot of work. So this time is different. Historically, the real estate downturn playbook, what did you do in a downturn in real estate? Where you cut overheads, you cut capex, you cut expenditure, you hunkered down, and you tried to survive. All you did was try and save money, survive, and get through it. But boom. That's not going to work this time, because this time is different. The lack of demand is not a cyclical market issue. It's an existential health and safety issue. And this time, the only way to get through the real estate downturn, the crisis, will actually be by spending money. Because you're going to have to spend money on upgrades to ventilation systems, on new materials, hardware, fittings, furnishings. You're going to need to institute new cleaning regimes and new cleaning processes. And you're going to need to spend money on communication, on data, on analytics, on interactions with customers, on increased staffing, and actually on entirely new business models and new ideas what actually constitutes an office, and even the nature of work itself. You're going to have to spend money on this, because in a sentence, everything that we know we should have done over the last 10 years, but have not had to, we need to now. We haven't had to, now we need to. Now, importantly, we really need to ensure this happens. There's been a lot of talk about, in other industries, like the air industry and the car industry, about not giving bailouts to companies that operate in a way that is fundamentally incompatible with a low carbon future. Now we need to do the same in real estate. We need to stop doing anything which is incompatible with a low carbon future. And that means we need to design digitally end to end. There's a lot of fantastic digital design tools out there. A lot of it doesn't get used, or it gets underutilized, or only parts of a project actually bother to use it. We need to construct using modern methods of construction, mainly because we're going to need to, because the only way we're going to be able to build is most likely in a factory when we can keep our distances. And also, if you want to build sustainably, you actually need to use modern methods of construction. You need precision engineered buildings with the highest tolerances or the lowest tolerances to error to enable them to be as sustainable and energy efficient, etc., as possible. We need to operate with an absolute zero tolerance for waste. We know how to do this. We know how to do this stuff, but we've never particularly bothered before. So if there's investment into anything, it needs to go into investing in zero tolerance for waste, for construction using MMC and designing digitally end to end. But we also need to invest in new technologies. There are technologies out there which act as replacements for high carbon steel and high carbon concrete. These are the two of the biggest emitters of all. We need to find ways of building at scale, not using high carbon steel and high carbon concrete. We also need to connect our buildings and use the data from them. At the moment, the real estate industry really doesn't use much data. It thinks it uses data, but it actually uses a tiny amount of data compared to other industries. We need to connect our building to the cloud, and then one building to another, and buildings to a location, and then an area, and then a city, and then the wider country. We need to actually generate data to be able to use data. We need to be able to use data to understand how our buildings work and how we can optimize them, and then monitor them, and then re-optimize them. And we need to be thinking that our job is to construct buildings where we can say our buildings, they look after you and they look after the planet. So they deal with sustainability and climate change, and they deal with COVID-19. They look after you and they look after the planet. Now, in all of this, we have absolutely no choice. The pandemic has shown that work and the office are actually not joined at the hip. As I said, funny enough, an awful lot is still working. In fact, all the companies that are doing really well out of the crisis, all the tech companies, you listen to them and you have Google saying, well, we're not really bothered if people come back this year. Facebook says, oh, well, don't come back until at least October if you want. Amazon's doing the same. Now, the point is, historically, we had customers who needed our product, who had to have our product. Now we need to make them want it. And there's a huge difference between having a customer who needs to be made to want your product than one who actually needs your product. And this moment now is proving that we need better products. We need better products, better services, better real estate, better everything, because we've got to get people to want our buildings. And there's a lot of buildings that, frankly, are not going to get wanted again. Now, for PropTech, these dark clouds all have a real silver lining. Now, this is what I would say to PropTechs they need to do. The first thing PropTechs need to do is obviously they need to survive. Rule number one, you've got to be there to play. So you've got to survive any way you can. You must get to the other side. There's a harsh but true value in getting to the other side. When you get to the other side, a lot of competition will not make it there. There is actually less competition if you make it through these situations. So it feels terrible at the moment, but if you make it to the other side, you are actually in a better position to thrive than you probably were before the problem. but you need to really focus on the value proposition. There's too much historically in prop tech which hasn't focused enough of why do I bother? Why am I interested? What's in it for me? We've got to have a better understanding of what the value proposition is to our customers. And I think we need to be really, really concentrating on things that increase or enable sustainability and increase or enable health and well-being. And if you look at these in a deep enough, wide enough, pervasive enough way, just about everything comes under increasing and enabling sustainability or increasing and enabling health and well-being. So that's where you need to head. You have to really demonstrate how you fit in. And the way prop tech is really going to demonstrate how it fits in is if it stops thinking of itself as being a vendor, but it's a partner. We need to be partnering with companies, and companies need to be partnering with us. I don't want to be a vendor to anyone. I want to be a partner. We should be looking to co-create the future real estate company. And the only way to do this is by being a partner, not a vendor. So the bottom line of all of this is that pandemics will come and go. This one will go, there will be another one. Or even if this one doesn't go and we manage to tame it, it will come back repeatedly. The winter flu comes back every year. We learn what's going on, we learn ways to deal with these things, but they will come and go. Climate change is not going away. It's been sort of forgotten because we have a more immediate problem to deal with. But we have seen how the whole world can be affected by one thing. We haven't yet got to the stage of really seeing climate change affect the whole world in one go. In January, we were watching Australia in flames, but it wasn't burning over here, wasn't burning in America. When everywhere's burning, then we already notice things. Now, real estate is actually at the absolute center of what is needed to deal with all of this. 40% of emissions, 30% of all energy. So there is no solution to the problems of sustainability, climate change, and COVID-19 that doesn't involve technology. So frankly, though it doesn't look like it at the moment, absolutely, PropTech's time has come. Thank you. That's me over, Nicholas. I shall now just unshare.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We have a few questions already. The first one was about industrial and logistics sector, so a different vertical. What is the application of COVID-driven ESG agenda for the industrial and logistics sectors?
It makes industrial and logistics much more important. It was already going that way anyway, because it's turbocharging e-commerce, obviously. So industrial centers need to get, we need more and more e-commerce centers. We probably need a lot more localized, and we probably need a lot more ecosystems of industrial centers that link together and then link with things like autonomous vehicles and autonomous delivery systems. Then there's the whole talk about more diverse, wider, shorter value chains. Most of that's going to come back. A lot of manufacturing is going to come back. All of this is industrial. Frankly, if you're in industrial, you're very lucky. You're in the right place.
Exactly. So one question, kind of out of skepticism. Anthony, do you really think buildings owners will choose to upgrade their property portfolios, especially as you suggest users are now thinking differently?
Well, to be honest, I think there will be a lot of property owners which won't do it. But why would you enter their building? I mean, honestly, think about this. This is not a benign thing. I am not going to go in a building ever again unless I am comfortable that that building is going to keep me safe and the owners and operators of that building are concerned about my health and well-being. So why would I go in? So I think the potential to create brands that differentiate themselves by paying huge attention to my safety and my health and well-being have a lot of opportunity in this market. And I honestly think people who ignore it are just going to find buildings that have no customers, or they have customers at a value point which is through the floor. Because the only reason you'd go in a building that has the potential to kill you is if you really needed to and you didn't have any money. So I'm very, very actually it's an interesting thing on that. You see, that's one of the reasons I think that paradoxically the flex market has the potential to be stronger in the future. Because if I'm running a flex operation, the incentives I have to have a really safe, clean and healthy environment are huge. Because if I mess it up, that could be end of my business. So I think that there will be people, there will definitely be people who ignore it. There'll be people who can't afford it. But you know, this is the real estate market. It changes around.
And what about residential real estate in a way? Because, you know, we are all working from home right now, and we may feel that it's fine to work from home if we have the normal amount of services. So don't you think that long term, this will have consequences on the demand of people? Like me, maybe I will prefer in the future working from home, and it's like that. I will ask for more services to my landowner.
I think it is equally transformational for residential, because this is clearly proving the point that an awful lot of people can work from home, but there's a lot of people it's not suitable for. I think you will find work from near home is going to be more important than work from home. So instead of, I live 30 miles outside of the centre of London, but it takes me an hour and a half to get in there, and I'm 2 miles, 3 kilometres from my high street. I'm more likely to want to work down there. There's also the interesting idea that where working from home is fine if you have enough space. I happen to be in an office at the end of my garden, but I've been doing this for 20 years. So I designed my life to give myself a nice office at the end of the garden. Yeah. But I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying they're younger people, and they're talking about, do we need an office? And they're saying, well, actually, we'd be quite interested in actually moving further out and coming in, say, 2 or 3 days a week. Because if we moved an hour outside of London, we could afford a lot more than, or an hour outside Paris. Maybe that'll happen. There are so many, you have to separate the short-term nightmare of now and the reality of what happens right now in the next, I don't know, 6 months, the rest of this year, and then the longer term implications. So I think residential has fantastic opportunities to again reconfigure itself, think of different form factors, services, and all of that.
Do you think the main reason of suboptimal use of data in real estate industry is 1, lack of proper metadata definition, 2, inconsistent data collection, 3, data collected but left unused, or other reason? Maybe you have to pick one. Maybe it's a mix. It's probably a mix.
I think the main reason there, the main reason most of real estate doesn't work as optimally as it should do, is that point about it hasn't needed to. It really has not needed to. You could get away with it, and also structurally, you know, if you've got a long lease and the occupier's responsible for the utilities, I don't really care if they're less efficient. I'm not going to spend the money on them, and I don't need the data. But now in this world where we're going to have to prove that our buildings are more sustainable and they're more healthy and they're safer, the only way we can do that is by having really good data. So I honestly think you're going to find a massive forcing function on data, because all these people, all these owners are suddenly going to go, I have to be able to prove X, Y, Z. I need to do it. How do I do it? Well, you need data. Well, I haven't got the data. How do I get it? Well, you have to spend some money, and you have to work with people who can help you doing it. And it's just going to force, the whole thing. Hopefully, I'm in a very positive mood.
It's great. We're Monday. If you're in a bad mood on Monday, it's never a good sign for the rest of the week.
Yes.
Tom says, great presentation. Thank you. How can we encourage the property industry to share data when there is a reluctance and sometimes perceived commercial disadvantage to doing so?
I'll give you one example that I've been talking with some people about recently, and it's something of a hobby horse of mine. I think going back to offices, because offices is my main thing. Offices, as I say, are going to have to prove they're safe, healthy environments, and they're going to have to partly doing that by demonstrating the quality of their air and and all their services. So they're going to have to, buildings are going to have to start proving, certainly to anyone who's thinking of it like me, they're going to need to prove that they have good indoor air quality. How am I going to know that? And someone said to me, yes, but I think these things ought to be published on the outside. And someone said, yeah, but a landlord's not going to publish that they've got bad figures. But I said, yes, but that's the opportunity for the landlord with the good figures. I'd be really publicly shouting about the air quality of my building. But I don't know if it's the same in France, but in the UK, every restaurant has to have a little sign in the front window, which is, what's it called? Cleanliness. It's just a cleanliness rating, 1 to 5. Everyone has to put it. It's not
the case in France, but it's mainly because everything is clean or dirty. I don't know, but
what if this is something where government can make a big difference? If government mandated that a building had to publish its indoor air quality ratings, that would change. The Australians have quite a good system for monitoring, for publicising data, but the trouble is it's voluntary, so it doesn't get the take up. But if government said your building has to say it's what its air quality is, that would transform everything.
There's a question that you started to answer to right now. What would be the role of public authorities, if there is one needed, to impose all the changes we need to more secure buildings? So I guess start of the answer is forcing and driving real estate companies and retail places to show what they do and show kind of a certification.
Yeah, I think yes, the certification and the transparency of data, I think, is really important, and it is something that only really, certainly in the UK, central government needs to mandate. Central government needs to say you have to provide this. I mean, they're already doing it on energy rating and the like. So this is, again, it's this difficult situation in, Rahm Emanuel's thing about not wasting a great crisis. To waste a great crisis would be to ignore all of this and just try and get going what was going before. To not waste a great crisis would be to say, this is, for the wrong reasons, a once in a more than a generation opportunity to say, if we're going to put everything's been broken, we're going to have the most GDP fall in 300 years or something ridiculous. This is like the worst time, economically, the worst time ever. So everything is broken. Humpty Dumpty has fallen off the wall. It's all in pieces. To put it back together again, let's not just put it back together as it was. Let's say this is the only chance to put it back as we want it to be. And there are signs of this happening. Certainly in London, there's a temptation and there's a lobby to say, well, we can't get to our offices, so open up the public parks and let us drive in, and we can all park in the parks. And i.e., let's fill the city up with private cars, as opposed to saying, well, why don't we change the roads to cycling? And over here, yesterday they announced they're going to start more extensive trials and probably legalize very quickly electric scooters, which you have in Paris, in London. But it only works if you take away the cars. Yeah. So the authorities, we've really got to hope that there's some people in local authorities and central government who are getting a grip on this and saying, this is our opportunity. I mean, your mayor in Paris is doing a lot of interesting work on saying, well, how do we make Paris better? And that's what we've got to do.
Yeah, it reminds me of a podcast I was listening to this morning. Someone was saying, it's surprising how it's easy to create bicycle lanes today, because 3 months ago, it looks like a big deal with association, fights, debates, and so on. And then after 1 year, you have one bicycle lane, and then you go out in a big street, and then you're trapped. But now everyone is doing that from one day to another. So
exactly, this is the forcing function. The same has happened in telemedicine. So online appointments with your doctor. And I was reading about this in America, that there's been a huge lobby in America that has stopped that happening. Now it's forced it to happen. And the same has happened over here. Suddenly your local doctor has gone from, don't come to us, we'll come to you through the screen. And like that, in 2 days, what would have taken 2 years. So it's absolutely true that you can suddenly go, well, we have to change. That's it.
Sure. Maybe 2 last questions if you have time.
Yeah, sure.
It was the first people to ask, actually, so I need to be nice with them. Do you think demand for cities will significantly decrease? If that is the case, then is there anything the core office market can do other than convert to new space?
The city angle of this is really difficult to predict and absolutely fascinating, because you have this dual situation where if you take Paris, London, New York, the last 10, 20, hundreds of years, they've been a magnet to people. They can be really difficult places to be. They're expensive, they're dirty, they're too noisy, but they're Paris, London, and New York. They're fabulous. They're better places than anywhere else. But when they start becoming potentially dangerous, it depends how long this goes on for. I suspect in the UK, in fact, I suspect in most of the West, there will be some movement out of cities, or more likely there might be more growth in secondary cities. Now, it's much more likely, I think, to happen in, say, the US than the UK, because the US has Austin, it has Denver, and it has Raleigh, and it has lots and lots of cities. UK is very mono, London has so much power, France is similar, Paris has so much power. It's really difficult to know. My instinct is that this will certainly precipitate a certain life stage person to move out of cities. So you take someone like London, great place to be young, not so great if you're married and got young children, unless you're really rich. So there's always a movement by the time mid-30s, during the 30s, lots of people. I think that'll be pushed. The center of great cities, I think, are still great because they're great cities. But it's got to be a really good building with great services that deals with fear and trust. If you think of fear and trust, people are genuinely fearful of where they go now. So you've got to assuage my fear, and you've got to enable me to trust you. And this is where I think you're going to have one of these markets, which is not everyone goes up or everyone goes down. There's going to be buildings and operators who do much better than others, because we will pay, again, maybe not in the very short term, we will pay a premium to go to their building because I know they're going to run it well, it's going to have everything I want. So there's a premium to quality, a big difference between, it's either going to be cheap or it's going to be really good. Overall cities, if I had a load of money to invest, I'd probably invest in the best secondary cities at the moment. That's what I think I'd do. Not saying that the first cities won't, they'll be fine. I mean, they've been there for thousands of years. They get over things. But it's to really be watch carefully. And a lot depends whether if we get a vaccine by the end of the year, then that's very different to if we don't get a vaccine for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Then things might change. What is quite interesting though is I think once you start to get people comfortable with remote working, and I've always been a fan of remote working, but I've never been a fan of permanent remote working. I've always worked probably 2 days a week in London, 3 days a week out. So it was in, out, in, out. I think more and more people are going to do that. But once we get more used to remote, actually people will start to think of their talent pools in a different way. Because if we're very office centric, we can only employ people who can get to our office every day. But if we're looser in terms of the need to get them to the office, it's actually a much bigger pool. So as usual, talent probably is in a better position to maybe have a few more choices about locations, but it's definitely just one to really keep an eye on, that one.
Yeah, and talent, as you know, is one topic that we definitely like, and I think we are not talking enough about talent overall in real estate, in prop tech, and the change in generation. And you talked about it in your presentation. It's so important to envision what's next. And in too many conversations, it's like nothing's going on about talent, and it's obviously a mistake. So last questions, a bit of name dropping, but connected with what you just said. Which corporate developers, constructors, etc., are doing a good job on sustainability? Who is leading the way? It's a question for the UK markets. So which are the right developers and the right buildings?
I think you probably have to say people. I mean, the immediate one that comes to mind is Edge. But you know, they've just announced that they're going to do their first London building. British Land for years have always had a very strong focus on sustainability. People like Argent and Derwent are really good. I suspect some of the smaller players are, but I still don't think. I still think almost no one is really doing it anywhere like they will be doing it in 5 years' time. I think it will be. I was talking to a very large Asian developer a couple of days ago about systems that they've been working on for years of being really end-to-end digital and roboticized and using data the whole way through. And they're a huge construction company as well. And it's quite amazing the returns they are expecting they can get to by completely reconfiguring how their business works and how they construct things are huge. It's not 10%, it's multiples. They're literally being X times more. It hasn't really happened yet. They're not there, but they've been working on it for a long time to really rethink how do we design something, build it, operate. So I think we're in the, you know, it's funny. I remember if you'd asked me in 2000 what the internet was like, having started in 95, I would have said the internet is fantastic and it's so fast. And I've got a megabit connection at home. It's just unbelievable. And you know, and then 10 years on, it's like, well, yes, that was good, but it's not good. So I suspect in 5 years' time, we will see people doing things that absolutely blow us away. And none of this you can do without tech. But this is the prop tech that I really like, because this is hard, it's complicated, but it has potential to really make huge impact.
Thank you very much. And by the way, the idea about it's more than vendor of solutions is, I think it's definitely something every company needs to keep in mind, especially real estate companies, because I think that some of them are still perceiving like this guy wants to sell me something. And actually, if we put more of what's going on in the society right now, as a prop tech company, it can definitely help adoption and raise a bit the level of the conversation, because it's not just about selling stuff. It's far more than that.
Yeah, it's also the really, I think that the thing that's so fundamental to that is it aligns incentives. So when I win, when you win, is very different to if I win, you lose a bit, and if you win, I lose a bit. If you align the incentives and think of a bigger pie, I think that is probably going to be one of the most fundamental things. Find yourself a really, really good partner to work with and get very close to them and help them like crazy.
So it's 18 minutes more than expected. So we could continue quite a lot, but we have other stuff to do, I guess. Thanks a lot for this great opening of the week. So everyone knows that we can work positively and that we can make good things happen. We just need to work in the right direction, and sustainability is definitely the right direction right now. So thanks for your insights, and for all the participants, stay tuned. Tomorrow, 4 p.m., like every day, 4 p.m. Paris time, like every day. Antony, have a great week. Stay safe, and see you later.
Thanks very much. Nice to chat. Take care.